Welcome to the Simple Questions Podcast. This is your host, Dylan Carnahan. The question for this episode is, what challenges do entrepreneurs face? You'll learn in this episode the process of raising capital, adapting to challenges, and advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Our guest is an entrepreneur, former SpaceX engineer, and the founder of Zohr, which is a mobile tire shop. I introduce to you Komal Choong. You know, after speaking with someone, this is a habit of mine where I'll go through, and especially if it's a very notable conversation, I'll go through and I'll write notes afterwards just to kind of retain that information. So This is going to be very scary. It's not like we have a courtroom stenographer over here or anything. But I will say, Komal, on 3/5/2021, you and I talked, and I had written some notes about our discussion. And I think this is a good place to begin this podcast. And here's a quote from my notes. This is heavily paraphrased, I would assume. Seeing people that are autonomous makes you want to become like them. Kamal's parents worked for themselves. Therefore, Komal didn't want to work for someone else. And quote from my notes here. So I think that's that's a good pull through. So I just want to ask, can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So that quote, that's pretty much my entire childhood and going into adulthood, summarized basically, because all we ever saw was our dad working at our restaurant. We would go and help him as we grew up. That's basically all we knew, right? And one thing that my dad always used to repeat to us was that, son, if you want to get wealthy one day, you're going to have to own things. You're not going to be able to work for someone and get wealthy. And, to be honest, I never even really had this desire or urge to really get wealthy. But I knew deep down that there was something more to it than just attaining wealth. I think this lifestyle of freedom and just kind of owning what you build, and then bringing value to people's lives, whether it's your employees, whether it's your customers, and just doing that really, really well. I think that in itself is a way to live a very fulfilling and righteous life. So from a very, very early age, I kind of knew that that's where I wanted to go. And there's a time in my college career where I kind of decided that, I would go and get a job after finishing university, but my ultimate objective was to build a business of my own. And that was, I think, after my first internship. But yeah, that's kind of where things began.
Yeah, and I know I had read it. I always do a little bit of research, right? You got to just do a little bit, right? And I
Yeah.
had read an interesting article put out in December about you and your family and kind of how your father had opened up his restaurant. I'll say it's a really, really good read, and I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Um, yeah, so you have this in mind. You kind of have your roadmap kind of imprinted on you fairly early on, right? I'm gonna own
Hmm.
something. I'm gonna create something. You know, uh, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go work for someone, but I'm gonna, with the ideal of creating something in mind. So how, you have kind of a buzzword on the resume, which is that you worked at SpaceX. So can you kind of explain what you learned from working at that internship and at companies prior to kind of going on your own?
Yeah, SpaceX was a really interesting experience. It actually, the relationship with SpaceX began during my college days. They would recruit very heavily from the Formula SAE design team group. So if you are very active in that organization, it's basically a collegiate competition where we design and build race cars and compete with them across the country and even internationally. But anyways, SpaceX used to recruit exclusively from this organization because those students had learned skills that were very valuable to SpaceX. But I decided to apply to SpaceX probably a few weeks after, maybe yeah, a few weeks after graduating, and I graduated in December of 2013. So I was very, very behind in the whole trying to find a job race because it just wasn't a priority for me, right? I was trying to take it easy and figure out like what do I do. But one day I just decided, hey, like, we've received interest from SpaceX in the past. Like, why don't I just apply for a position? And I heard back within a week, and then I had a job offer to begin work
Wow.
probably a month later. So it was all very, very quick. Moved out to Los Angeles, got started, and kind of hit the ground running. And my team there was also all Formula SAE alums from all the major universities in the US. Um, and yeah, it was a very, very different environment from what I was imagining or what I'd been used to through a past internship. Very, very fast paced, very chaotic, very large organization. It wasn't small by any means at that time. There was over 4,000 employees. With pretty much everyone being in engineering or manufacturing. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of work. Very, very taxing. And I think that's a common like complaint of like past employees of SpaceX is that you just get burnt out at some point. But I think from just the overall experience point of view, um, there's really nothing quite like SpaceX from a professional work environment. Just because there's nothing else, there's no other organization really working to solve the problems that SpaceX is solving.
Hmm.
There's a like you walk through the office and there's a like a wall mural of Mars being half terraformed, and it's like, whoa, like some of the folks at SpaceX actually think that they're going to be able to do that. So like the dreams are so big, the vision is so big, it's so much bigger than yourself that you just feel so compelled to spend your time there.
Yeah.
And to spend like ridiculous amounts of time. Like it's not like an 8 to 5. Like no, you're working 12-hour shifts, like 5 to 6 days a week. You know?
Wow. That's that's a lot, right? That
Yeah,
yeah, I mean that is an interesting environment. The goal, and then you have that kind of culture surrounding that of like we need to get there, right? We're
yeah.
grinding to get there.
And imagine like just like everyone is single-minded. Like everyone has the same mindset, right? So like even if you were super lazy and like laid back, like you would not be that way, or you would not last very long at SpaceX.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you know, how did how did that portion of your story conclude?
So I was there for a short stint. Um, while I was there, one of my roommates, I believe he had a friend who had started a startup and then received investment from Tim Draper. He's a billionaire venture capitalist out of the Bay Area, and this startup founder also went through Tim Draper's like a university, like an entrepreneurship university. It's
Okay.
not like an official university. It was more of like a couple month long program that you attend. But anyways, I learned about this through my roommate, and I was so intrigued by it, and I connected with his friend, and I was like, wow, like this seems like a really interesting next step from what I'm doing right now, which I just didn't see myself at SpaceX long term because it didn't align with my long term vision.
Yeah.
I just thought, why should I spend my time and energy building for somebody else's dream when I could be spending this time of my life building my own and
Yeah.
learning from those? So, and I was like only like 23, 22, 23 at that time. So, very, very early on my career. So basically, I decided, and I think SpaceX also, my team and my manager agreed that, hey, like, you know, maybe you shouldn't continue on with this internship onto a full-time role. So it was kind of mutually decided that, like, I basically left after a few months, moved up to the Bay Area, started this entrepreneurship program during the summer of 2014, and then, that's where my entrepreneurship journey really began. And I started to get exposure to all sorts of things related to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you go back to that vision, right? It's really easy to lose that, right? It's really easy to lose that. I don't want to get like too gooey here, but almost like that internal agreement you've made with yourself, right? You're like, hey, I'm gonna go work somewhere, but I'm gonna build my own thing, right? And then you get kind of that
Yeah,
all that external stimuli, and you go, oh wait, I think at one point I was gonna start something on my own, like you forget
yeah.
about that. It like
Well,
atrophies.
the world doesn't want you to start things. In fact, it's everything is designed in a way to kind of pull you and distract you away from your dreams. So it's very, very important that you start building just a really strong relationship with yourself and growing yourself. I think I had decided very early on that, I'm gonna invest all my time and money into myself during my 20s. And that was just something that I was willing to do at that time. But now I'm 32, and I think it's kind of shown its effect on me over the years. But the thing is, society doesn't necessarily design entrepreneurs. Like entrepreneurs really have to fight for what they want. And I think my family that's helped me tremendously. Without their backing and their support and just their example, I probably wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing today.
Yeah, well said. I mean, a support system goes a long way, and right, and especially
Yeah.
kind of a map, if you will, right? You are already imprinted with that, you know, desire for autonomy.
Yeah.
When after you go through this training, if you will, you obviously went ahead and did something on your own. So, can you explain, what inspired you to start that business, and what challenges did you face getting that off the ground?
Yeah, good question. So, the business that we've built to date, called Zohr, um, was started after a couple of failed attempts at starting a new business. And that began like right after this Draper University program. That was just an environment to kind of launch and test ideas and figure out that what type of problem is worth working on. And it took me probably a good part of a year to really find an idea that had stuck in my mind that I really felt strongly about, that I felt like there needed to be a solution for. And it also helped to have proof of concepts already on the market in other geographies, which is what fueled the confidence to be able to start something like Zohr. But anyways, my brother and I, he was in, I think, like just starting college at that time. But a few years prior to all of this, we had been buying and selling car parts, buying and selling cars. Um, a lot of times we'd find ourselves at all sorts of repair shops, dealerships, trying to get these cars that we were buying and trying to get them ready to resell. Um, getting those cars fixed, getting a tire replaced, getting a wheel replaced, whatever it might be to get this vehicle reconditioned. We tried all different types of businesses, and we always felt like there was something missing from that experience. We always felt um, that this was a very, very subpar experience that needed to be elevated. And every subpar experience kind of forced us to ask the same question, which is, like, why can't these services come directly to me? Like, if groceries can be delivered, if I can order a cab with a push of a button, then why can't I do the same for tires or any other automotive service? So that
Mm.
was like the basic question that we asked ourselves. And when we couldn't find an answer to that, and then we also started to do our research in the market and find other people who had sort of answered this question in their own way, we decided, hey, like, it's still early on. This is a market that we're passionate about. This is a problem that we're passionate about solving. Why don't we do something about it? And my brother and I agreed. We built our first service truck and we started operating, I think October of 2015. And then, since then, we've been kind of off to the races. But we faced pretty much every challenge you could probably imagine, starting a new business. And because this was our first attempt at not just launching a business, but operating it, and we knew nothing about doing any of that. Every little event was a learning lesson. Every little small mistake uh, was an opportunity to learn something that we didn't know. And pile on top of that, we're building a completely new type of business that doesn't even exist in our area. You can imagine the sort of uncertainty that creates and what you have to kind of do to create solutions.
Yeah, and I'm like that's one of the things that I've experienced too is like when you introduce a new concept, it's very hard for people to grasp. Like there has to be like a tangible way for them to like feel it out,
Yeah.
right? You're like conceptually, yeah, like we do use like we order right like an Uber and it comes to us and all that. And then
Yeah.
when you describe it using words, inevitably like it falls on deaf ears for lack of a better term a lot of times, right?
Yep. Hmm. Yeah. Communication is critical in any business, both internally and externally out into the world so that they understand what you do. Thankfully, we were, a very, very tangible business. We have actual people who work for us. We
Mm-hmm.
have these service trucks that perform certain types of services to fix your vehicle. So we had that going for ourselves, but it was still not easy because we don't have a physical store, right? People still have to
Yeah.
find us. They have to hear about us. Like, imagine you're an early adopter of our service and you get your tires replaced in your driveway. Now you want to go and tell like 10 of your friends. It has to be something like the messaging has to be super clear and easy for them to be able to communicate and share this with their friends and family. Um, so, but I think early on we learned from our mentors, from different friends and family members who have other businesses that having very clear and concise messaging is essential to launching a new business. The more simple you can make it, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I always kind of think of it as like a fictitious scenario like you're trying to describe to your significant other like what to get from Walmart, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
trying to describe it. You're like, "Well, it's a thing that, and if you have like
yeah,
this long Discord, 253 words to get across what you're trying to say, like that's a tough conversation and that means that conversation is probably not going to happen." Right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned a couple of challenges there, but you know, I want to hear about some additional challenges that you face, such as maybe the pandemic or, an economic downturn?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is the tire industry is relatively resistant to economic downturns. Um, the pandemic was something that was very, very shocking because it affected consumer behavior around driving. When the number of
Yeah.
miles driven dropped like they did in like March or April of 2020, um, you see huge effects to how people buy tires. Now, eventually things will normalize. That was what we were thinking, right? Was that
Yeah.
eventually people have to like return back to normal. Like this can't continue to go on forever. But we just didn't know how long that would take. The uncertainty there was really, really troubling. And Yeah, it took us a long time. Like we were just very, very confused and didn't know what to do at that time. And I think everyone sort of felt that way. It wasn't just us. But that was a very, very uncertain time that we had to kind of get through and build our strategy around. So like the big thing that we did, and I think a lot of other businesses in our space did at that time, was shift their focus from consumers to businesses. Because what was happening was, the only vehicles on the road were commercial business vehicles, fleets.
Hmm.
So but that was a short-lived, I mean, that's still a big part of our business today. But consumers have come back like we had expected them to. Um, but just getting through that, like I would say 12 to 18 month period after those shutdowns, that was a very, very challenging time for the business. I think other times, when we were trying to grow our service business and then also build out engineering solutions to run this business, um, that created a lot of challenges financially, which is why we needed to go out and raise money from a variety of different types of investors. Um, I think that's kind of the name of the game. Like we basically were building like multiple businesses all at once, if you could imagine that. Not only are we delivering services for all these different types of customers, but we're also building out uh, these bespoke solutions to operate our business at the quality levels that we wanted to run it at. We couldn't see ourselves doing this business injustice and operating using inadequate tools and software.
Yeah. So you're having to develop that, right? That's even more
Yeah, yeah.
cumbersome.
Yeah, so like, and to do that with very, very limited resources, um, can be very, very challenging. It, but I think it really forced us to kind of think outside the box and come up with solutions that we had never even thought would be possible for our business. Like think about like having and I think the pandemic really helped with this, was like the whole work from home culture. Like all of a sudden, like you didn't have to have people in the office. Your workforce could be global, right? Like we had engineers and designers all across the world. We started to hire a customer support team that was offshores. Like all the typical rules of how you do business kind of went out the door with the pandemic, and it created a lot of opportunity for us to sort of generate these ideas for running our business more efficiently, um, in a more innovative way. And yeah, those are still working for us even to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? That how constraints can enable growth, right? And
Hmm.
you have also this very turbulent, catastrophic event. You have a global pandemic, and that kind of this through this turbulence kind of throws some things up in the air, right? And it kind of
Yep.
changes behavior, whether that be your consumers, which you're kind of hurting a little bit, and you have to do some pivoting to kind of look at businesses, or just the simple fact, hey, we can hop on a Zoom call, right? We don't need to have that office or whatever the case may be. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things
Yeah.
that changed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think consumer behavior has sort of gone back to normal when it comes to tires. So, like, while people were forced to buy things online during the pandemic, now it's no longer a constraint that people face. But yeah, I do completely agree. Like, tough times create, um, opportunities to grow and learn and to innovate. Without constraints, I don't think that a lot of these innovative things that or products or services that we use today would exist without constraints. Um, it just it wouldn't allow you to focus on the problem, right? And when you really, really focus deeply on something, that's when you actually come up with novel solutions, which is what we've done so far. And, taking the business forward, we're basically enabling other businesses to do what we've done. So running the service business of Zohr has only been a proving grounds for the solutions that we've developed and the engineering and the thought that's gone into the the back end of the business that sort of powers it. So that's where we see that there is a potential for us to kind of see our vision completely through, which is, how do we change the tire replacement experience for millions of Americans? Um, we originally thought that we could do this all ourselves using uh, our own service vans, our own employees, but we see a greater opportunity enabling others to do that, to offer a more innovative service to their customers, to stand up new businesses around mobile service.
Can you elaborate a little on maybe the decision and honestly emotional coaster, like that process of pivoting as well as getting new insights and trying to figure out how to apply those, because I feel like you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
people are resistant to change. And even the best of us that embrace it, we're a little,
yeah.
we want to keep what we have, right? We don't want to lose it, right? So the kind of all these pivots are like, hey, we think this, we could fulfill our vision in a little bit of a different way. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that thought process and how that feels internally?
Yeah. Well, startups are just a massive roller coaster in terms of emotions. At least for an early stage or first time founder, it's just crazy, right? But what over, after accumulating a lot of experience, I think we've learned that change is the only constant in a startup's life cycle. If you're resistant to change, you might as well fail now and give up, because things are going to change. The world is going to force you to change. And if you don't change with it, then you're going to potentially die. That's just the reality uh, of how things work.
Yeah.
But I think what experience has taught us even more is related to the idea of emotion and emotional connection to your business. You have to learn to disconnect emotionally from it, which is so tough. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
this business is your baby. Like, it's all you know, it's all you've created. You own it from every aspect of your life, right? Your time, your
Yeah.
emotions, like your sweat, blood, and tears go into this thing that you've created. But to be able to emotionally detach from it, you begin to think about things a lot more objectively.
Yeah.
You begin to use, um, you begin to hear advice and listen to advice from your board members, from your advisors, whomever it might be, um, with a different set of ears, right? You begin to process it differently. So we've been very fortunate. We assembled a small group of advisors for the business. We have a very well educated and experienced board of folks who have experience in the automotive industry who also, you know, have invested their times into other automotive startups. So they kind of share those experiences with us as well, to ex expedite learnings, you could say. But I don't think any decision that you make in a startup is an easy one. Even when you do emotionally disconnect, it's still not easy to like lay off your team, right? For example, it's not easy to shut down what you think um, at one time thought was your entire business and to focus on something completely different. Like none of those are very easy decisions to make, but you still have to make them because you have to sort of look beyond the horizon at the vision that you're building towards. And if you can feel strongly enough about that vision, then everything that comes in between that vision that's past the horizon and where you're at today is sort of like you shouldn't let that get in the way. You should just continue to keep your focus on that vision and work towards it and build towards it.
Well said. I think there's a psychological effect that the longer you spend time on something, the more you see yourself in it. And
Yeah,
boy, oh boy, that certainly gets in the way of objectivity, right? Right.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
especially if you also have the added pressure of maybe the stakes of those decisions you're making and the pace they're occurring because of the change in the internal and external environment. It's very difficult. One of the things that you kind of mentioned in there was some of the counsel that you have on some of these
Yeah.
matters. And man, how do you find people that you can trust, or how do you even gauge that in some manner? And it's and then you're going to have your guard up, especially even higher, because that you have so much ownership and stake and time in something. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I think it begins with a certain type of mindset that you must embody. Um, and I think it's this value of humility. If you can embody that value, then you can learn a ton of valuable knowledge and wisdom from others. And I think that's one thing that my brother and I, we both sort of kind of, I mean, I guess we just kind of embodied it from our family values, but it really showed its effect as we started to have conversations with early investors. And we never really went to them by asking for money initially. It was more so like, hey, like, let's just meet up and talk over coffee,
Yeah.
and, let's share what we're building, like why we're building it, and just kind of keep an ongoing dialogue. That ongoing dialogue in that relationship that you begin to build and those tips that you begin to learn from those investors is what enables you to one day be able to raise money from them. And that's what we did early on. We developed relationships, and when we were ready to raise, that money was readily available for us. And then from there, one good relationship led to an introduction to another relationship, and then one thing, just it's just like it just keeps on going as far as you want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we basically ended up in Techstars, which is a global accelerator program. We were introduced to the managing director of our program, and from there, through that program, that was sort of an accelerator to not just take the business to the next step, but like to accelerate our networking,
Yeah.
for us to meet so many more investors, to meet so many more advisors, potential customers, partners, you name it. And I think you must not resist um, these opportunities to connect with folks, because you never know where a conversation might lead or who a person might know, right? So we really began to place emphasis on relationships, on building these connections, on learning from people as much as we can. And then I think one thing that we learned very, very early on in Techstars, it's kind of a motto within Techstars, is to give first. If you want to connect with anyone, like even cold call somebody or cold email someone, like think about what you're giving to that person.
Yeah.
What are you
Well said.
offering that person? If you can offer them something or, some sort of value, they're going to be a lot more open to connecting with you and offering you their advice. And sometimes, it's just, you can give them a couple $100 for an hour of their time or something. Like sometimes it is transactional, but a lot of times it doesn't need to be, and it isn't, because the startup world is, you'd be surprised how much people want to help each other because they've received help from somebody else. So there is this like this idea in this community that you kind of pass it on. You help those who need help whenever you can, because somebody's helped you that same way along your journey.
Well said. That couldn't be more true. I know, my personal experiences, based upon how you and I met. I remember this is a testimonial, if you will. Startland newspaper. I'm looking at the blog posts they put every year of top 10 startups in Kansas City. And I just cold called the 2 to 3 companies that were still around from each year. I went back 5 years, and that's how Kamal and
Mhm.
I first met, was through an interaction like that. And I think I reached out to, I don't know what the stat is. I reached out to like 15 people. I think I got like 7 responses, and I met with like 5 people just by doing that,
Nice.
which is
Yeah.
crazy. And I think I
Yep.
got at least 2 job offers alone off of just doing that, which is crazy,
Yeah.
like to think about. And I think that, as you said, as someone who's, cold calling people for the podcast, oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, figure out how to write an email, please, or do a text
Yeah.
message.
Yeah.
And you can listen to the episode we did with former hostage negotiator and Black Swan group of negotiators, Sandy Hine. But there's a big thing I always say, like you versus I, right? So when you're
Yeah.
like messaging someone, you're like, I would really like to meet you. I think it's really cool. You have to have a value proposition. Start out with
Yeah.
them, read it from their perspective. That's a little tip from How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
Hey, Kamal, you have really interesting, story, your work at Zohr. Make it about them. That's who you're talking to. Know your target
Yeah.
audience. It's pretty easy when you're sending an email,
Absolutely.
right? It's to Kamal, it's to Dylan, whoever you're sending it to,
Yeah.
and show that value. It's highly effective. It's worked in my whole brief tenure on this planet, and you're hearing it again from Kamal. Couldn't have. I'm really glad you brought that up. Something we haven't talked about. It's been alluded to a couple times, and this kind of podcast is about entrepreneurship and business. So I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact, like, can you explain, or what's the process for getting investment for a startup company, as general as possible?
Um, Great question. I wish it was as simple of an answer as the
Okay.
question is. Um, because fundraising is most often not a very straightforward process. Um, it's very, very challenging. It's the worst thing that a founder has to do, because not only is the process brutal, um, but it's also just like you're selling a piece of your company, right? Like as an entrepreneur, like you shouldn't want to sell a piece of your company, like that's at least my perspective. If you can run your company profitably, you should do that and you should grow it that way. Raising money is always a something that should be looked at as an option, but it should never be people's focus. And I feel like, over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been so much money available to founders that they really ignore, basic business practices and go and raise money initially, without considering the alternative, which I've known a lot of other founders who have raised very little money, and then, they find a way to make their business profitable, and then they continue to grow it profitably. Um, but, I think in terms of raising money, like let's say you've decided that you want to raise money.
Okay.
Um, I think you need to, obviously, you need to know your business inside and out, but you need to be able to explain it in layman's terms, like
Mm-hmm.
very, very simple. Like, let's just imagine like you're developing some highly, highly technical artificial intelligence company. I don't know, whatever it might be. Like, how do you explain that in one line to someone who knows nothing about your industry? I think that is absolutely critical, and being able to focus on the big picture. Like, where do you see this business going? If you can explain the big picture to someone, you're more than likely to get and you have like supporting traction around your business, like you're growing, you're profitable, whatever it might be, whatever the metric is that you track, then you're more than likely to get a meeting with an investor. Um, and but I think even more important than that is building those relationships. You have to get your foot in the door somehow, right? And the best way to get um, in in front of an investor is to start building a network. This network might include founders like myself. It could include um, other friends, family. Like, it could be through a lot of different ways. But you described a very, very easy way to do it, which is just cold call different people and see who you can connect with. And maybe you've maintained a relationship with those 5 people that you met with even to this date. And those people could probably introduce you to 5 investors each. Now, that is an entire pipeline there, just, from a basic outreach that you did years ago, right? So I think it all comes down to the narrative that you tell about your business and do it in a clear and concise manner. Um, and then it's all about the network that you build, probably before you have to raise. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult to get, funds from someone. If you just, again, if you're self-absorbed, you go, Kamal, I want money from you.
Yeah,
And it's probably
yeah.
not the most effective way to go about it. And I'll also say,
Doesn't usually work that way. Yeah.
yeah, a friend of the show, comedian David Nastor, he always says when telling jokes, it's God, he's gonna be mad at me. Uh, Simplest to understand terms, something to that effect. Simplest to understand, easiest to understand. Excuse me. That's how you tell a joke. That's again, you've highlighted a couple things: networking and communication, right? Really big, really big. Whether you're communicating about your product or service, whether you're communicating to, a prospective person that you'd like to get to know better, all of that revolves around how you communicate and, in a certain extent, market your product, service, and yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, you nailed it. That's pretty much it. And then, fundraising is a process that consumes a lot of time, a lot of energy. There's a lot of ups and downs. So just be ready to face those battles, because it's not going to be easy. Um, for some founders, it can be easy if you have all your ducks in a row, but I would say chances are you probably don't, because startups don't work that way. Um, but yeah, especially like as a first time founder or someone who's raising money for the first time.
I want to get back to you and your journey, kind of move away from some of the concepts that you've kind of had to work through and get exposed to.
Mhm.
What do you enjoy most about being an entrepreneur, and what keeps you motivated and inspired?
That's a really good question. I think it's the ability to solve problems and to build solutions. I think that's the most rewarding thing for me, at least. I've always been a very product focused individual. More recently, I've kind of like summed up my purpose in life, and this can be all encompassing, including business. But it's that I want to build solutions that enhance the human experience, right? Like that's like the simplest way that I could explain why I do what I do. Not what
Mm-hmm.
I do, but like why I do what I do. And it's related to Zohr. You know, we wanted to improve people's lives by having a one less unpleasant experience at a tire store. You know, let's just say that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, with our restaurant, it's maybe that, you know, people can go to this restaurant and enjoy an incredible meal, which if you read any of our family's restaurant reviews, you'll just see people raving about it, right? So like
Yeah.
I can see that being part of it as well. Um, you know, my future goals are to potentially build something that helps society, you know, from a nonprofit point of view. So when it comes to that, like that falls directly in line with, you know, enhancing the human experience, making life more enjoyable for others, um, maybe allowing other people to discover what their life's purpose is as well,
Yeah.
because a lot of people are in the dark, unfortunately, in this day and age, with social media and all this other information just clouding their minds that they can't even see through for themselves, like see the path that they need to go down. So I think for me, that's really that one liner that I shared earlier, that's really what drives me to continue on the path that we're on. Whether it's building this business or another business. I just simply won't waste my time on anything or anyone that doesn't allow me to achieve that goal that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, I think you know anyone needs to have some sort of a one-liner that they can follow as their guiding light, kind of like their North Star. And if they have that, just like the vision that you're building towards with your business, like you need something to guide you in life too. You know, let's just
Yeah.
say your business doesn't exist tomorrow, or something else happens. You know, you have to be able to still continue walking forward. And the earlier you find that, the better off I think you would be.
Absolutely. You do. You need that. You need that North Star. You need that purpose. You need that rationale because you're going to get beat up a little bit. Right? And if
Oh,
you're
the world
just
will
doing,
totally beat you up. Yeah.
yes. And if you're doing it for those vanity metrics, oh boy, when you're not getting them, you're going to be down bad. You're going to be real down bad. You're not getting those views. You're not getting that money, whatever that
Oh
vanity
yeah.
metric is, that doesn't reaffirm whatever, you're going to have some internal levers, right? And as you're saying, again, kind of communicate with yourself, get yourself in line, and then figure out what aligns with that, and you have a far easier time going forward.
Yep. I think I've heard this from countless individuals, and I think it's even true within my own experience. But the the most critical thing that you need to do as a founder to scale a business is to first work on yourself and scale yourself.
Yeah,
Without that, you're not going to make progress at the same rates that you think you can. Um, yeah, like it's absolutely essential part of the journey. So, you know, read more books, connect with more like-minded people, you know, have great conversations with them. That's what I think this entrepreneurial journey is all about. That's like the only way you can actually create meaningful change in this world.
Yeah. I I think that was a really good one. I'm gonna throw this at you though. I thought that was some good stuff there, but I'm gonna throw this at you anyway. Come on. What
Sure.
advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just starting out? Anything different? I feel like that was pretty
Um,
good.
yeah, I feel like I've covered most things. There's not anything that comes to mind. This is something that I feel a lot of entrepreneurs don't embody this value, and it's very, very simple. It's taught to us as like little children, um, but it's the value of patience. Um, this journey is not going to be easy. Like if anyone thinks it's going to be easy, you're widely mistaken. So, um, yeah, embodying patience and really understanding where you come from. I think that's the name of the game. Like if you're not patient with the results and you don't put in enough effort, you're gonna probably not see your vision through. Like it takes time to build businesses and to see results. And sometimes it's just not your time. So you have to decide whether it's a problem worth working on. And if it is a problem that's worth working on, then you need to wait. You need to be patient. Um, I recently read this quote, and it says, within yourself, make patience the bow. It's using this metaphor of a bow and arrow. So it's
Okay.
saying, hey, within yourself, make patience the bow, make patience the bowstring, and make patience the arrow, and you will never miss the target. So, it really like if you really embody that value truly, then you'll never miss. You just have to be patient. And I think a lot of things in this world have become so like instant gratification. Like, oh my gosh, my friend just made $1 million in this deal or whatever. Like,
Mm,
or they just bought this car, or they bought this house, or this happened, that happened. Like, you need to like disconnect from that and to really connect with yourself and to build this resilience, this patience within yourself. Because building a business is all just patience and persistence. That's all it is.
oh. I got one last question for you, Kamal. Just a little sneak peek, maybe anything you're willing to share on this. But what are some of the biggest challenges you're currently facing at Zohr, and how are you tackling them?
Um, let's see. I think a lot of when you're running such a highly complex ground operation, managing it without the adequate headcount can be very, very tough. So things get overlooked, things fall through the cracks, um, and cleanup takes a lot longer than creating the mess does. Right? You can create a
Yep.
mess tomorrow, but it can take you a year to clean it up.
Yeah.
So I think that's been probably one of the biggest struggles that we've faced in the last year after the pandemic. Um, it's been a process, but just having very, very disciplined approach, setting like breaking your schedule up so that you're spending time tackling the problems and blocking and tackling constantly. Like that's how you make progress. So it's just a constant battle basically to get things moving. But again, back to that patience and persistence. If you just continue doing this, you're eventually going to reach your goal or your end desired state. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been working on with the current business. Obviously, our strategy has shifted more towards solutions, so that creates its own set of challenges, which again, we're taking the same approach,
Yeah.
just taking it one day at a time, one problem at a time, putting all of our focus towards it, and then waiting for the solutions to kind of take into effect.
Yeah. Kamal, how can people find out more about you and the work you're doing at Zohr?
So I generally stay pretty quiet, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me by email. It's just my first name at zohr.com. Um, yeah, if there's any founders that need someone to talk to, need advice, need any help whatsoever, I'm very accessible, even though I may kind of stay away from the limelight. But yeah, you can also find me on LinkedIn. I generally prefer LinkedIn or email for anyone reaching out and connecting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. Kamal, thank you for sharing your knowledge and time today. In every interaction that we've had, you've always been very down to earth and super empathetic. So I really appreciate your kind of candid manner that you approach life, and just for the just for transparency, like being able to have like a founder interact with me when I was like 22 trying to figure out what the heck to do. I mean that greatly helped my confidence, and not only that, but some of the things that you helped me with at that time were incredibly important. So I just want to thank you for that.
Not a problem. Happy to be a resource for you and for anyone else. I think again, like I said earlier, uh, it's. I hope that whoever I help passes it on to help somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's like the that would make me like myself feel like I've kind of accomplished what I'm trying to accomplish by helping someone.
That wraps up our conversation with Kamal. We talked about patience, the importance of networking, and finding advisors that you can trust. Go to this episode's show notes to see any resources Kamal mentioned during our episode. And lastly, subscribe to the Simple Questions podcast to get notified when our latest episodes are released. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep asking questions.